Garamagad Lascian Corla, I so move. I move that leave be granted to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Residential Tenancies Acts 2004 and 2020 so as to provide for greater security of tenure and rent certainty for tenants and to provide for connected matters. So this is our Labour Residential Tenancies Tenants' Rights Bill, and I thank you, Lascian Corla, for the opportunity to introduce it. I've drafted this along with my Labour colleague and comrade, Senator Rebecca Moynihan, our housing spokesperson, and I want to pay tribute to Rebecca for all her work on this issue. And it's a hugely important issue. During the Dublin Bay South by-election campaign, and I was so proud to have and honoured to have been elected following that campaign. But during the campaign, we heard from so many people, renters and homeowners alike, who were so concerned about the difficulties everyone is experiencing in rented accommodation. These are widespread difficulties, but they amount to difficulties in three particular areas. Difficulties with those who lack security of tenure because they are facing eviction or fear of eviction, difficulty with unaffordable rents and rent hikes, even where people have been paying rent at a particular level for years, that they fear unaffordable rent increases. And thirdly then, with poor quality of life and low standards of rented accommodation. Again, a really serious and persistent issue for so many. So these are the three issues that this important bill would seek to address in a range of constructive and positive ways. And there are also issues that were identified in a recent report just published this week by the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission in conjunction with the ESRI. Their study highlighted disadvantages experienced by particular cohorts, those with disabilities, single-parent families, travellers and others in the housing system. But there are widespread issues facing those who rent. And their stark findings underline and emphasise the issues that were addressed, that were raised with us during the campaign, and really underline the need for this important renters' rights legislation. So first, we believe it's vital that we strengthen protections against evictions for all those who are renting. We know there remains a significant risk that homelessness levels will rise following the lifting of pandemic restrictions, and we're also conscious, I think all of us, that our homeless figures should include those in so-called hidden homeless living situations, those who are staying with friends or who are so-called couch surfing and who often are not, whose situation is not sufficiently recognised. So the legislation I'm introducing today would significantly restrict the circumstances in which evictions can be carried out or tenancies terminated. Among other provisions, we seek to remove grounds for so-called no-fault evictions. We are looking to ban the practice of a landlord terminating a tenancy on any grounds after 6 years of a Part 4 tenancy, and we're providing that evictions can only happen for renovation purposes where no reasonable measures can be taken to maintain the dwelling fit for human habitation. And we're also looking to reduce the range of family members that a tenancy can be terminated to benefit. So that's the first set of provisions seeking to address the security of tenure issue. The second challenge we're addressing in the bill is that of the rent hikes, this fear of rent increases that we've heard so much about from so many. We know that despite the introduction of rent pressure zones in 2016, rents have increased by almost 40% in Dublin and 20% elsewhere. To tackle this, our bill would link annual rent increases to the Consumer Price Index after a 3-year rent freeze and would declare the entire state a rent pressure zone, among other vital measures. The third issue we're addressing is that of quality of life or quality of accommodation. And again, it mirrors a finding in the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission report. We know that particularly in Dublin, many renters are faced with very poor quality housing and a host of unfair restrictions that impede their long-term stay in accommodation and that contribute to the enormous demand for house and apartment purchase. In other European countries, it's common for renters to be able to keep pets in their homes, to be able to air dry clothes and laundry on a balcony, and to request an unfurnished property so that they can bring in their own things, their own furniture, their own comfortable things that they want to have around them in their home. And this contributes to seeing rental accommodation as a longer-term prospect for single people, for families, for households generally. And in addition to the simple measures that I've outlined, our bill would require landlords to file a statement that the dwelling would meet minimum housing standards when registering a tenancy. So we're keen to see this bill debated. We're hopeful that it will be debated in our private members' time next week. And indeed, that was a commitment I made during the by-election campaign, that if I was elected, that this would be the first piece of legislation I would introduce. And I'm very proud to do this. I want to ensure that we're building on existing legislation, but we're building in better protections for renters. We know people are tired of 5 wasted years of of inadequate housing policies we've seen from the two larger parties of government, and they're weary of a continued failure to put forward a vision for housing, an inclusive vision for homes and housing in this country. So renting must be seen as a long-term and viable option, must be made an option that is much more attractive to people, and those who are renting must be given greater protections and greater rights. We want to address the power imbalance between renters and landlords, and that's the key issue that we're seeking to address in this important bill. Gurmagh.